The galaxy was calm, or at least it looked calm from far away. Stars burned silently. Planets moved in their endless paths, and warships of the Galactic Empire floated like steel shadows among the stars. For thousands of years, the Empire ruled with power and fear. No one dared to challenge them. Entire civilizations obeyed without question. If a species resisted, the Empire's fleets arrived, cities burned, and the lesson was learned quickly. Peace in the Empire was not real peace. It was silence forced by fear. In the great halls of the Imperial Senate, the rulers congratulated themselves. They believed their empire was eternal. They believed no enemy could rise against them. But far away at the edge of the galaxy, something new had begun to stir. Scouts returned with strange reports. Pirates who raided the outer sectors had vanished. Fleets sent to punish rebels never returned. When the wrecks of ships were found, the damage was unlike anything seen before. Weapons had been cut with surgical precision. Engines were destroyed in seconds. Whoever did this was not fighting in desperation. They fought with planning. They fought with skill. The name began to appear in scattered whispers. A word that carried both confusion and unease: humans. The reports called them small in number, weak in technology, and not worth concern. Primitive colonists, the first scout said. They only control one blue world and a few small colonies. The Senate laughed. How could such a young race matter? The Empire had conquered thousands of species, many far more advanced. This was nothing but noise in the dark. But admirals who studied the wrecks were less certain. The precision of the strikes, the speed of the attacks, the total destruction of enemy warships, it was not random. These humans did not fight like anyone else. Their ships were smaller, their fleets fewer, but they fought as if every move had been rehearsed 1,000 times. They never wasted shots. They never spared slavers or pirates, and they always disappeared before reinforcements arrived. Rumors spread through the lower ranks of the fleet. Soldiers whispered about ghost ships that appeared out of nowhere, fired only once and vanished. Some said the humans had weapons that bent space itself. Others said their crews fought like machines, cold and unshakable. Still others claimed that the humans carried a hatred unlike anything the galaxy had seen before. When they fought, they did not simply try to win. They tried to erase the very idea of war from their enemy's mind. In one small chamber of the Senate, a young minister raised a concern. What if these humans are not so weak? What if they are the reason our fleets vanish? His voice was sharp, but the chamber filled with laughter. An elder senator waved him away. We have ruled for millennia. No new species can threaten us. If they resist, we will crush them as we always have. The young minister lowered his head, but in his heart, unease remained. On a border world, an imperial commander prepared a small fleet to test this new enemy. 10 warships against one colony ship. The outcome seemed obvious. The commander recorded a final message before leaving. By the time you hear this, the humans will belong to the Empire. But days later, a single broken ship drifted back into port. Its hull was scorched, its crew silent. Only one officer survived, his eyes wide with terror. When asked what happened, he whispered only 4 words. They warned us first. The story spread quickly, carried by frightened voices. When the humans were approached, they did not beg for mercy. They did not promise surrender. They only gave a warning. We do not fight wars. We end them. And then the Empire's fleet was gone, destroyed in minutes. In the Grand Palace, the Emperor heard the story with a frown. To him, it was nonsense. He believed no new species could threaten his rule. Yet deep in the shadows of the Empire, some began to wonder. The silence after battle was too perfect. The wrecks were too clean. And the humans, this weak young race, were too calm. Among the stars, whispers grew stronger. Entire sectors spoke of liberated planets. Chains broken, oppressors vanished. Every story ended the same way. Human ships appeared. The fight lasted minutes, and then peace returned. Not the false peace of the Empire, but something stronger, something final. The galaxy had not yet realized what was coming. To most, humans were still nothing more than colonists from a small blue world. But those who had seen them in battle knew better. They had looked into the fire and seen something terrifying. These humans did not fight for conquest. They did not fight for power. They fought because they remembered. And they had sworn never to repeat the mistakes of their past. The storm had not yet broken. The Empire still laughed in its golden halls. But far away, human warships glided silently through the dark. They did not sing songs of glory. They did not boast of victories. They prepared, and when the time came, the galaxy would learn the truth. The Empire thought it knew war. It thought war was control, numbers, and power. But humans knew something deeper. War to them was not endless. It was an ending. And soon, the Empire would discover, far too late, that humans never fought to prolong wars. They fought to end them, completely. The Imperial fleet slipped into the edge of human space with a quiet confidence. 10 warships moved together, their silver hulls glowing under distant starlight. Crews walked their decks with the same calm certainty as farmers tending fields. They expected no danger, no resistance. For the Empire, this was routine, another young species brought to heel. The flagship commander, Lord Vanar, leaned back in his chair as stars drifted by. "Primitive colonists," he said with a smirk. "They will surrender before we even raise our weapons." His officers laughed with him. They had seen this pattern many times. A new species meets the Empire shows its strength, and the species kneels. It was never different, but this time something was different. Ahead, sensors caught sight of a human colony ship. It was slow, massive, and fragile-looking, carrying thousands of civilians toward a new world. By all logic, it should have been defenseless. The Imperial ships closed in, preparing the usual broadcast: surrender or be destroyed. Yet before the message could be sent, a human voice cut through the fleet's comms. Calm, firm, unafraid. "This is the colony ship Odyssey. We know who you are. Turn back. If you do not, there will be no war. There will only be an end." The bridge of Vanar's flagship fell silent for a moment, then erupted in laughter. The humans dared to threaten the Empire. With what? Cargo haulers and mining vessels. Vanar's lips curled into a cruel smile. Fire a warning shot across their bow. Let them see what true power looks like. A bright lance of energy streaked across the dark, cutting the void just meters from the human ship. But the Odyssey did not run. It did not surrender. It simply stayed still. Then, out of the silence, shadows emerged. One by one, human warships slid from the blackness of space, their forms lean and angular, painted to vanish in the void. The Empire's sensors had not even detected their approach. 10 ships, 20, 30. They encircled the Empire fleet in perfect formation, their weapons glowing faintly with restrained fire. On the Imperial bridge, officers scrambled at their controls. "They were here the whole time," one stammered. "How did they—" He could not finish. The human voice returned, steady and cold. "We gave you a warning. You came with threats. Leave now and no one will die." Vanar's pride burned hotter than any sun. He would not be humiliated by colonists. He raised his hand and barked the order. "Destroy them!" The Empire fleet opened fire in a storm of blazing energy. Beams and torpedoes lit up the dark like fireworks. But the humans moved before the first shots landed. Their ships twisted, darted, and slid through space with movements no Empire vessel could match. Shots that should have struck home hit nothing but emptiness. Then the humans fired. It was not a storm. It was not chaos. It was precision. Each blast struck exactly where it needed to. Engines were cut. Weapons were shattered. Shields collapsed in seconds. In less than 2 minutes, 3 Imperial warships were dead hulks drifting in silence. 2 more lost power and were abandoned. Not a single human ship had even been touched. On Vanar's bridge, panic spread. Officers shouted over one another, alarms wailed, and screens flashed red. But the human ships never rushed, never wasted a shot. They dismantled the fleet with calm efficiency, piece by piece like surgeons at work, and then, just as suddenly as it began, the firing stopped. The remaining Imperial ships floated powerless, their weapons offline, their engines broken. The humans had them surrounded. But instead of finishing the kill, the comms opened again. "This is your final lesson," the human voice said. "We are not here to conquer. We are not here to play war. We end wars. Remember this if you wish to survive." Then the human ships vanished. No explosions. No wreckage. They simply melted back into the shadows, as if the stars had swallowed them whole. The Odyssey continued on its path, unharmed as though nothing had happened. Only one crippled Imperial cruiser made it back to report. Its crew, pale and shaking, told their story to the Senate. "They could have destroyed us all," one officer whispered. "They didn't even try. They just let us live." But in their eyes was something worse than defeat. It was fear. Fear of an enemy who fought not for land, not for power, but for silence. An enemy who fought like war itself was an infection to be cut out. The Senate dismissed the reports, of course. Old men and women in golden robes called it exaggeration, cowardice, illusion. Humans are weak, they said. They will fall like the rest. Yet in the dark corners of the empire, among soldiers and captains who had seen too much, the whispers grew louder. Whispers of ships that fought like ghosts. Whispers of warnings ignored. Whispers of a truth too sharp to deny. The humans had revealed themselves. Not as prey, not as rebels, but as something far worse. They were not players in the Empire's endless game of conquest. They were the end of the game itself, and the Empire, though it did not yet understand, had just made its first mistake. Whispers travel faster than light. They slip through trade ships, across border stations, and down the long metal corridors of warships. And soon, whispers of humans reached every corner of the Empire. The story began with survivors, broken soldiers who had crawled home after the disaster at the colony ship. They spoke of shadows in the void, ships that moved like ghosts, weapons that never missed. Some were dismissed as liars, too ashamed to admit cowardice. Others were silenced by officers who feared panic. But the whispers could not be contained. In the lower decks of ships, in the smoky halls of spacers' taverns, the words were always the same. The humans warned us first. And then they ended it. To many, the stories sounded like fantasy. The Empire had ruled for thousands of years. It had crushed empires, broken rebellions, and burned worlds into ash. How could a young race, barely beyond its home star, challenge such power? Yet fear is a seed that grows in silence, and the whispers planted doubt. In the barracks of the Third Fleet, soldiers spoke quietly as they cleaned their weapons. One muttered, "They say human ships never show on scanners. They just appear." Another replied, "My cousin served on the cruiser Kareth. He said the humans didn't destroy them. They cut them apart, piece by piece, like they knew every weak spot." The conversation ended when an officer entered, but the fear stayed in their eyes. On a mining world near the border, workers swore they saw a human vessel in orbit. It did nothing, just watched, then vanished. Days later, the sector governor received a transmission. "No threats, no demands. Just a single sentence. We will not fight you unless you bring war." The governor laughed at the message, but he could not sleep that night. In the Senate, debates turned heated. A few cautious voices suggested investigation. Admiral Raylos, a veteran of countless campaigns, raised the alarm. "These humans are not what they seem," he warned. "They strike only at slavers and pirates. They move with discipline I have never seen. If they wished, they could have destroyed entire fleets, but they chose not to. This is not weakness. It is strategy." The chamber erupted with scornful laughter. "Strategy? From colonists?" One senator sneered. "They are insects. Nothing more." But Raylos did not laugh. His hands shook as he recalled a single image. Wreckage of Imperial warships cut with perfect precision, as though the attackers had studied their design for centuries. "They fight differently," he whispered, almost to himself. "They fight to end." Beyond the polished walls of the Senate, soldiers and civilians began to believe the rumors. Merchants reported entire pirate fleets gone silent. Slave markets closed overnight when raiders vanished without trace. Whole planets whispered thanks to unseen protectors who struck in silence. Every story ended the same. The humans came, the fight lasted minutes, and then the war was gone. Some began to call them the Enders. Fear spread even to the high admirals. Orders were given to gather intelligence, to capture a human ship, to learn their secrets. But no ship could catch them. Scouts vanished. Listening posts went silent. Patrols returned with empty hands and empty eyes. The Empire grew restless. Power built on fear depends on silence, and silence was breaking. On the capital world, riots began to stir. "If the humans can free border worlds," the crowd shouted, "why not us?" The Senate answered with executions. But the fire of rebellion had already been lit. Meanwhile, in a hidden chamber far from the capital, Admiral Raylos met with his closest officers. Maps lit the table, showing star systems where Imperial fleets had fallen. Each was marked with the same cold pattern: swift, surgical strikes, no wasted effort. "They are not trying to conquer," Raylos said. "They are teaching. Every battle is a message." He looked at the faces around him. "And the message is this: wars do not continue when humans arrive. Wars end." His officers shifted uncomfortably. One finally asked, "Then what should we do?" Raylos stared at the map, his voice heavy. "We should be afraid. On the other side of the galaxy, the humans prepared in silence. Their fleets were small but growing. Their captains spoke little, but their actions carried weight. They did not cheer victories. They did not carve statues. They carried only memory of their own ancient wars, of the times when humanity nearly destroyed itself. They had sworn a vow never again. To the Empire, this vow was invisible. The Senate saw only arrogance, only rebellion to be crushed. They could not understand that humans did not fight for land or wealth or pride. They fought so no child, human or alien, would live under the shadow of war. But in the cold void of space, among drifting wrecks and silenced fleets, the truth was becoming clear. The Empire was not facing a new enemy. It was facing an ending. The whispers grew into a storm. Across the galaxy, voices repeated the same words, sometimes in awe, sometimes in terror. Humans don't fight wars. They end them. And deep in his golden palace, the Emperor finally frowned. For the first time in centuries, he felt a shadow of doubt. He did not yet believe the stories. But he knew one thing with certainty. Fear had already begun to spread. And fear once planted is harder to kill than any enemy fleet. The decision was made in a hall of gold and arrogance. The Emperor stood before the Senate, his voice sharp as steel, his eyes burning with anger. For weeks he had listened to whispers of fear, of humans who struck like shadows and left fleets broken. He was done with whispers. Fear spreads because we allow it, he declared. So we will crush it. We will crush them. Across the Empire, orders spread like fire. Every ship that could fly was summoned. Fleets abandoned patrol routes. Warships left the protection of rich worlds, and entire sectors were stripped bare. Hundreds of vessels gathered, more than had been seen in one place for centuries. Cruisers, dreadnoughts, carriers, swarms of fighters, all forged into a single armada. The greatest fleet the galaxy had ever seen. Admirals promised quick victory. This will not be a war, they boasted. This will be a lesson. When we are finished, no one will even remember the humans. Crowds cheered in the capital. Propaganda flooded the airwaves. Songs were written of glory to come. But far from the golden towers, in the quiet of barracks and hangars, soldiers were less certain. They had heard the whispers. Some had seen the wrecks with their own eyes. And when no officers were listening, they muttered among themselves. If the stories are true, no fleet is big enough. The armada moved like a storm across the stars, each system trembling as it passed. Civilizations bowed their heads as the fleet thundered overhead, afraid even to breathe. The Empire's power was on full display, and then finally they found them. At the edge of a desolate system, a small cluster of human ships waited. They were few, too few to face the armada. Dozens of Imperial scouts confirmed it. Barely 30 warships, fragile against the Empire's might. The admirals laughed. Victory was certain. Reports were sent back to the capital. This will be over in one strike. The fleets lined up across the black void, a sea of Imperial steel facing a handful of human shadows. The signal was sent. Engines roared. Weapons locked, and then the humans moved. It was not a charge. It was not chaos. It was a dance. Their ships flowed through space with impossible grace, sliding between targeting lines, vanishing from scanners, reappearing only to strike. The first Imperial dreadnought exploded in silence, its core cut apart by precise fire. Before the debris even settled, 2 more warships lost their engines. The admirals shouted orders, desperate to form walls of fire. But walls meant nothing. Human ships bent around them like water, striking at weak points no computer had calculated, as though they had already fought this battle 1,000 times in their minds. The Empire's armada returned fire in a storm of blazing energy. Beams streaked through the void, missiles screamed across space, but the humans were never where the weapons aimed. Every shot seemed to miss by a hair's breadth. Every torpedo lost its target at the last second. In minutes, chaos replaced confidence. Communications filled with screams. They're behind us. Shields failing. We can't lock on. Ships collided with each other in panic, trying to escape the silent predators among them. But the humans did not pursue every kill. They struck, crippled, and moved on. Their purpose was not destruction, it was demonstration. On the bridge of the Imperial flagship, Admiral Carroll slammed his fists against the console. "This cannot be happening," he roared, but it was. The greatest fleet of the Empire was being taken apart like a puzzle, every piece removed with cold precision. Then, as suddenly as it began, the firing stopped. The battlefield lay in ruins. Dozens of Imperial warships drifted, powerless and broken, Many were destroyed completely, their crews lost to the void. The survivors floated in silence, waiting for the final blow, but the humans did not strike again. Instead, their ships formed a line across the void, calm and unshaken. A message was broadcast, clear and simple. You call this war. We call it ending. You brought an armada. We brought silence. Learn from this. If you bring war again, there will be no empire left to fight it. And then the human ships vanished, melting back into the dark, leaving only wreckage behind. The silence after the battle was worse than the fighting. Survivors whispered in broken voices about ships that danced through fire, about weapons that never missed, about warnings that felt like judgment. Back in the capital, the Senate received the news. At first they denied it. Impossible, they said. Exaggeration. But soon the evidence arrived. Wrecks towed into orbit, reports from trembling admirals, the faces of soldiers who had looked into human fire and survived. The propaganda collapsed. Crowds no longer sang of glory. Instead, they whispered of endings. For the first time in its long history, the Empire had faced an enemy it could not understand. An enemy who did not seek land or wealth or even victory. An enemy who fought with one purpose only, to erase war itself. The Emperor sat in his golden hall, his hands tight on the throne. He thought the Empire had shown strength, but what he saw now was something else entirely. The humans had not fought to win. They had fought to teach, and the lesson was clear. Wars do not last when humans arrive. Wars end. The wreckage of the Great Armada drifted in silence, scattered like broken teeth across the void. For the Empire, it was more than a defeat. It was humiliation. The greatest fleet in history had been dismantled in hours, not by overwhelming firepower, but by something far more dangerous: precision, patience, and mercy. The Senate seethed. In the capital's halls of marble and gold, senators screamed for answers. Admirals defended themselves with trembling voices. They knew, one insisted. Every weakness, every blind spot. They fought as though our ships were open books. Another whispered, it was as if they were not fighting us, but the very idea of war itself. The Emperor silenced them all with a glare, but even he could not dismiss the truth. The humans had not only won, they had chosen to spare. That choice gnawed at him more than any defeat. Mercy was a weapon the Empire did not understand. And so, the search for answers began. Captured wreckage from human strikes was brought to secret stations. Engineers tore open twisted metal, searching for clues. What they found was not comforting. Human weapons were not stronger, they were often simpler. Their ships were not larger, they were leaner, designed for speed and silence. Yet every piece was crafted with ruthless efficiency. No wasted space, no excess. Every part existed for one purpose: to end battles quickly. In hidden archives, scholars searched ancient records. Reports surfaced of humanity's past, wars so vast they had scarred their homeworld forever. Conflicts that burned cities, poisoned skies, and nearly erased their own species. The humans had fought themselves with such fury that survival had become uncertain. But they had survived, and they had sworn never again. One archivist read aloud an old human saying, recorded from intercepted transmissions: war is not to be fought. War is to be finished. The word sent shivers through the chamber. Meanwhile, survivors of the Armada spoke in hushed tones. They described the silence before each strike, the precision of human fire, the way the enemy ships vanished before counterattacks could land. It was like fighting memory itself, one captain said. They knew us before we even moved. Rumors grew darker. Some whispered of machines in human minds guiding them with perfect calculation. Others said the humans had merged with their ships, becoming something beyond flesh and blood. A few dared to whisper the most terrifying idea of all, that the humans fought not with technology but with unity. That every decision, every shot was guided by a single will shared among them. In the Senate, Admiral Relos spoke once more. His voice was tired but steady. They do not fight as we do. They do not fight for pride or conquest. They fight to erase war itself. Every battle they enter is designed not to win, but to prevent another from ever happening. He paused, scanning the chamber. They have learned what we have not, and that is why we lose, the senators jeered. Fool's words, they barked. No species can change the nature of war. But deep down, some felt the weight of his warning. Across the galaxy, liberated worlds began to speak openly. When humans arrived, slavers vanished. Armies surrendered. And instead of raising flags of conquest, the humans left silence behind. No taxes, no demands, no banners. Just freedom. That silence was louder than any speech. It spread faster than any propaganda. And it terrified the Empire more than any fleet. In hidden meetings, Imperial spies delivered more reports. Human soldiers were trained not in endless drills of conquest, but in scenarios of defense, protection, and quick endings. Their doctrines were clear. Never let wars drag on. Never give enemies time to recover. Never allow innocents to suffer. To humans, war was not a tool of control. It was a disease to be cut out swiftly and completely. And then came the most chilling discovery of all. A recovered transmission intercepted between two human ships during battle. One voice. Target neutralized. Next strike? Another. No. Enough. They've learned the lesson. The Senate chamber fell into silence as the message ended. The humans were not just fighting battles, they were teaching. Every strike was chosen, every decision deliberate. They destroyed only what had to be destroyed, leaving survivors to carry the story. It was not war. It was warning. The Emperor listened to the reports with growing unease. For the first time, he felt something unfamiliar, doubt. The Empire had always assumed enemies fought for power, for land, for survival. But the humans fought for something the Empire could not grasp. They fought so no one else would have to. And deep in his heart, the Emperor understood the danger. A people who fight for power can be bargained with. A people who fight for land can be bought. But a people who fight for the end of war itself, such an enemy cannot be corrupted, cannot be reasoned with, cannot be broken. The truth was dawning. Too late perhaps, but clear. Humans were not here to rise as another empire. They were here as a final act, a closing chapter. They did not seek to play the game. They sought to end it. And if the Empire continued down this path, it would not face just defeat. It would face silence. The silence of wars that never return. The Emperor could no longer laugh. The whispers of humans had grown into thunder, and thunder shook even the golden walls of his palace. Fleet after fleet had been dismantled. Governors wrote panicked reports of uprisings. Slavers begged for protection that never came. The name human spread like a storm cloud, heavy with dread. But the Emperor was not ready to surrender. If war cannot break them, he told the Senate, then words will. For the first time in centuries, the Empire tried diplomacy. An envoy was sent, escorted by a small fleet, carrying banners of truce. The meeting was held in the shadow of a dying star, far from any world. The envoy expected arrogance from the humans, perhaps desperate negotiation, perhaps fear. But when the human ship appeared, it came without fanfare, silent and unadorned. The human captain spoke in a voice steady and calm. "We did not call for this meeting, but since you have come, speak." The envoy delivered his speech with the pride of the Empire. He spoke of treaties, of trade, of peaceful coexistence. But beneath his honeyed words lay threats. The Empire is vast. We do not seek to destroy you, but if you continue, your worlds will burn. Join us, and you may keep your small place among the stars. The human captain listened without expression. When the envoy finished, silence filled the void. Then the human replied, "You still do not understand. We are not here to join. We are not here to bow. We are here because war must end. If you bring it to us, we will end it. If you bring it to others, we will end it. That is our vow." The envoy trembled. There was no bluster, no pride, only certainty. The words carried no sound of ambition, only the weight of judgment. The report returned to the capital, and fury followed. The Senate shouted for blood. "They dare to insult us! They dare to threaten us!" The Emperor's eyes burned. Diplomacy had failed, so the Empire turned to shadows. Assassins were dispatched, killers trained for silence, armed with the most advanced cloaking devices and poisons. Their target, human commanders. They never returned. Every attempt ended the same way. The assassins vanished, their ships drifting back with no crew alive. No wounds were found, no signs of struggle, only silence. Sabotage was tried next. Factories on human colonies were targeted. Trade routes poisoned with traps. Spies seated among their people. Yet every plan unraveled before it began. Traps failed. Spies were exposed. And always human fleets appeared in time, as though they had already read the Empire's thoughts. Admiral Relos, once mocked, stood before the Senate again, Do you not see? They are not fighting as we are. They are not reacting, they are anticipating. Every step we take they have already prepared for. It is as if they know our play before the game begins. The chamber raged against him. Impossible. No one sees the future, but Raylos did not flinch. They do not see the future. They remember the past. Their world nearly destroyed itself in endless war. Every mistake we make, they have already made. Every weapon we build, they have already faced. They learned. We did not. The Senate fell silent, if only for a moment. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, human fleets struck again, not with conquest, but with liberation. On a world enslaved for generations, Imperial garrisons woke to find their weapons offline, their ships dismantled. The humans walked among the freed with no banners, no demands. They spoke only one sentence: you are free. Keep it that way. The message traveled faster than any ship. The Empire began to fracture. Entire systems whispered rebellion. Old wounds reopened. Where the Empire brought silence through fear, the humans brought silence through hope. And hope is harder to kill than fear. The Emperor grew desperate. He demanded new fleets, new weapons, new tactics. Factories roared, soldiers were pressed into service, but none could erase the truth. The Empire had lost its balance. The humans had not only broken ships, they had broken the illusion of control. In the palace, the Emperor's advisors urged him to sue for peace. We cannot fight what they are, they pleaded. We must adapt. But the Emperor's pride burned too fiercely. Peace is submission, he spat. And the Empire does not submit. Yet even he could not ignore the cracks. His throne was still golden, but beneath it, the stone had begun to crumble. On the far side of the stars, human commanders gathered in silence. They did not cheer their victories, nor did they gloat over the Empire's collapse. Their voices were calm, their eyes steady. They will try again, one said. Another nodded. And when they do, we will end it again. A younger officer, weary from endless battles, asked softly, why spare them? Why not finish it now? The answer was quiet but carried weight. Because endings must be chosen. If we force it, they learn nothing. If they choose it, war itself ends. That is why. And so the galaxy stood at a turning point. The Empire still roared, but its voice was cracked. The humans still warned, but their warnings were sharper. Every world knew the truth. One more step, and the choice would be made. The Empire believed it had all the time in the galaxy, but time was no longer theirs. It belonged to the humans, those who fought not for conquest, not for pride, but for the silence after war. The turning point had come. The only question was whether the Empire would see it before the end. The cracks in the Empire widened, and soon they were no longer cracks but great fractures across the galaxy. Once the sight of an Imperial warship was enough to keep whole worlds in line. Now those same warships limped home broken or not at all. Fear, the great weapon of the Empire, was slipping away. It began quietly. A mining colony refused to send tribute, emboldened by whispers that humans were near. An enslaved world overthrew its garrison overnight. The chains of its people shattered. When the Imperial fleet arrived to restore order, it never returned. The humans had been waiting. News spread faster than light. Entire sectors heard the same story again and again. The humans did not conquer, but wherever they appeared, the Empire's grip vanished. Governors begged for reinforcements. Merchants stopped paying Imperial taxes. Soldiers deserted their posts. For the first time in centuries, the Empire looked fragile. In the Senate chamber, arguments turned to shouting matches. Some called for peace, some for total war, some for retreat. But the Emperor's pride would not bend. We are eternal, he thundered. Empires do not fall to insects. Yet even as he spoke, the throne beneath him shook with unrest. On the frontiers, the humans pressed forward, their fleets cutting through space like knives. They moved with terrifying speed, striking not at random but with purpose. Every liberated world was a message. On one world, the humans dismantled an orbital fortress in less than an hour, then left without taking a single stone of plunder. On another, they freed prisoners, gave them supplies, and departed. No banners, no speeches, only silence and freedom. To the people of the galaxy, it was a revelation. The Empire had always said war never ends, that order required chains. The humans proved them wrong. They ended wars in days, sometimes hours, and then they left. The idea spread like fire. Peace without empire was possible. Admiral Relos, once scorned, now became a prophet among frightened officers. They are not building an empire, he told anyone who would listen. They are dismantling the very idea of it. The Emperor, furious, launched one last campaign. He gathered what remained of his loyal fleets, smaller now stretched thin, and hurled them into human space. He imagined glory, a final victory to restore his throne. Instead, he found ruin. The humans did not meet him in open battle. They let his fleets advance, cutting supply lines, disabling ships one by one. By the time the Emperor's forces realized the trap, it was too late. A dozen systems were lost in silence. Whole fleets vanished without a trace. Desperation turned to madness. The Emperor ordered entire worlds burned to ash, hoping to draw the humans into rage. But the humans did not rage. They struck back with precision, dismantling the fleets responsible, sparing the civilians when they could. To them, war was not vengeance. War was surgery. Cut out the disease, save what remained, and still they spared him. The Emperor could not understand. He expected invaders, conquerors, tyrants in new colors. Instead, he found liberators who wanted nothing but the end of his rule. Mercy was not a gift, he understood. It was a weapon sharper than any blade. Across the galaxy, rebellion spread like wildfire. Planets once loyal to the Empire now rose against it, knowing the humans would come. Slaves took up arms. Soldiers refused orders. Even admirals began to defect, whispering that perhaps the humans were right, that perhaps war itself could end. The Senate dissolved into chaos. Senators fled to distant worlds, taking riches with them. Some begged the humans for protection. Others tried to rally resistance, but found no armies willing to fight. The Emperor sat alone in his golden hall, surrounded by empty thrones. He could feel the walls closing in. His empire had been built on fear, but fear no longer worked. Everywhere, the people believed in something stronger. They believed in the silence the humans left behind, and then came the final blow. A massive fleet appeared above the capital world, not imperial, but human. Their ships hovered in perfect formation, silent, weapons powered but unused. The people below looked up, waiting for fire to rain down. Instead, a single message echoed across the planet. The war is over. You are free. Keep it that way. No invasion followed. No army landed. The humans simply waited, their presence alone enough to end centuries of tyranny. Across the city, slaves tore off chains, banners of rebellion rose, and imperial soldiers laid down their weapons. The capital did not fall to conquest, it was abandoned by its own people. In the palace, the Emperor raged and wept. They cannot end us like this, he shouted to the empty hall. But he knew the truth. It was already over. His empire had not been defeated by fire, but by something far more final, the refusal of others to fear him. The fall of the empire was not marked by an explosion or a battle cry. It was marked by silence. The silence of liberated worlds, the silence of fleets that no longer obeyed, the silence of a people who realized they did not need their emperor anymore. And above it all, the human fleet watched in silence. They had not conquered. They had ended. The palace was quiet. Once it had echoed with the voices of senators and generals, with music and with praise. Now its halls were empty, its banners torn, its throne surrounded by silence. The emperor sat alone, staring at the golden walls that no longer shone as brightly as they once had. Outside, the capital burned not with fire but with change. Chains were broken, soldiers laid down weapons, and voices once silent now filled the streets with freedom. The emperor had always believed that power was eternal, that the empire would last as long as stars burned. But as he sat on his throne, he realized that his empire had not been taken from him by fire or blade. It had been taken by silence. The humans had not come as conquerors. They had come as endings. A messenger, one of the last loyal officers, fell to his knees before the throne. His armor was cracked, his eyes wide with despair. "Your Majesty," he whispered, "the fleets are gone. The armies refuse to fight. Even the governors have abandoned us. There is nothing left." The emperor did not answer at first. He looked at his trembling officer, then past him, through the great windows of the palace. Above the capital, the human fleet still hovered, hundreds of dark ships, silent, unmoving, their weapons cold. They had not fired a single shot since their arrival, and yet they had broken him more completely than any battle could. "Why?" the emperor finally asked. His voice was hoarse, almost childlike. "Why do they not finish it? Why do they not strike me down?" The officer had no answer. He bowed his head and the silence filled the hall again. The truth came to the Emperor slowly, painfully. The humans did not need to destroy him. They had already won. His people no longer feared him. His soldiers no longer obeyed. His empire no longer believed. His throne was nothing more than a chair made of gold. A voice broke the silence, not from the palace but from the skies above. The humans had sent another message, broadcast across the capital and every world still listening. It was not long. Remember this. We do not fight wars. We end them. The words rang through the empty chambers like a sentence passed by a judge. For a long moment, the Emperor could not breathe. He understood now, far too late, what the humans were. They were not another empire. They were not another rival to be crushed. They were a scar upon history, a reminder of what endless war had cost their own kind. They had carried that scar into the stars, and with it a vow never again. Wherever war rose, they would appear, not as conquerors, but as an ending. The Emperor rose from his throne, his legs shaking. He walked slowly to the great window and placed his hand against the glass. He could see the city below, alive with voices he had silenced for centuries. He could see the sky above, filled with ships that watched but did not strike. For the first time in his life, he felt small. They do not want my crown, he whispered to himself. They do not want my throne. They only want the silence after war. His voice broke. And they have it. Behind him, the officer spoke softly. What shall we do, Majesty? The Emperor closed his eyes. He thought of all the fleets he had commanded, all the worlds he had burned, all the voices he had silenced. He thought of the humans, this strange, defiant race who fought not for conquest but for peace. And he understood the final truth. There is nothing left to do, he said. The empire has already ended. I just did not see it until now. The officer bowed his head, tears in his eyes. The Emperor turned back to the window, watching the human ships slowly drift away from orbit. They had not come to rule. They had come to remind. The message they left behind would outlive him, outlive the Senate, outlive the empire itself. Across the galaxy, liberated worlds celebrated. Chains were broken, banners burned, and voices rose in song. Not songs of conquest, but of freedom. The humans did not stay to be worshipped. They did not carve statues of victory. They simply moved on, leaving silence behind. The Emperor sat once more on his throne, but he no longer felt its weight. He was not a ruler. He was a relic. The galaxy no longer belonged to him or to any empire. It belonged to those who had chosen peace. And in the years to come, when children asked how the greatest empire in history had fallen, the answer would not be about battles or heroes or rebellions. The answer would be simple. The empire fell because it learned too late to understand the vow of humanity, too late to realize that humans do not fight wars for glory, or for power, or for survival. They fight to end them, and when they end them, there is nothing left but silence.